It's recently come to my attention that there are some things that people are a little squeamish about. We know that these things happen, and they happen every day. We just don't like to think about them or like to talk about them. But as writers of fiction, we definitely have to write about them. Today, on The Writing Engineer, Death and Dismemberment. My first novel, Amara's Law, is a story about a girl who is disappeared. She's experimented on and given incredible powers. She escapes from her captors and unfortunately loses her memory in the process. This leads to a problem as she doesn't know how to control her powers or even that she has them. This leads to some unfortunate incidents where her captors or pursuers are injured fairly horribly. There are some decapitations, some people have various parts of their body turned into jelly and other things. When writing this type of scene, we have to be careful to make sure that we don't go overboard, because it's very easy to do so. I find what helps is that I would imagine what would happen in this type of situation were it to happen in real life. Then I try and stick to that script. Let's take an example. A lot of people know about the comic book hero, The Flash. Now we all know The Flash is extremely fast. Some of us might not realize that he also has an enhanced healing ability. He heals really fast as well. Because if he doesn't, then what would be the point? The first time he went too fast, he would tear himself apart. No more main character, no more story. But that is an aside. What happens when an object gets hit by something that is moving really fast? Typically, that object gets turned into applesauce. We don't necessarily have to write all the gory details, but it is good to include a few to allow the reader's imagination to run wild so they can fill in the stuff that happens off camera. For my particular writing style, I found that comparison of these things to food items tends to be extremely helpful. For example, I would probably only have to say overripe tomatoes to get someone to think about things exploding in the human body and what that might look like. Squishing an overripe tomato is an oddly satisfying thing to do. You should try it sometime. And then you'll have maybe an idea of what might run through someone's head when you start to write this type of scene. I also found that melons are particularly useful, not to mention breadsticks, pretzel rods, and other things that are brittle. I think the most important thing is to try and find balance between going too gory and not gory enough. Maybe to help with this, if you know someone who happens to like gory movies, or slasher films, or horror films, you could probably run your scenes that contain this type of thing by them to see what they think of. Now, if you're trying to write this type of story, you definitely want to amp it up a little bit. But if it just has to happen in the story because that's what would happen, you want to make sure you include enough information that the reader gets the general idea and maybe not too much more. You don't want to turn off your readers by being too gross. Well, what happens after this type of scene? Usually the person being assaulted generally dies. There's not much you can do if half your chest is missing, or your head has been removed from your body, or any one of your limbs has been removed from whatever. This leads us to our second topic. How does one kill a character? That is a good question. Killing a character can be hard. It can be fun. It could be easy. It could be pointless. It could also be any one of a number of other things. There are three things that it should never be. A, predictable. B, cliche. And C, unnecessary. If the character's death that you are planning is predictable, you'll lose a lot of punch in your story. Take, for example, horror movies. If there is a character who is separated from the main group or leaves by their own volition, and they happen to say, "I'll be right back," we all know what's going to happen. They're dead. Other keys are "don't worry" or I'm sure it's nothing. You all know them because you've seen them. Don't do this. We don't want our audience to have a predictable death. Let me rephrase that. We don't want our audience to know a character's death is predictable. What about cliché? I feel that this should be avoided as well. There is a high likelihood of eye-rolling if your character's death is cliché. We should try and avoid clichés like the wise teacher death, or the you killed my family death, or the you killed me death. Alright, actually that last one is the more along the lines of you tried to kill me death, but you get the general idea. Hey, if you can write a story about a character who dies at the beginning of a book and then has an adventure in the book, that I think would be awesome. Lastly, what about unnecessary? By this, I don't mean that the character's death has to have a huge significance in the story. It does not need to act as a motivator for your main character's quest. What I mean by unnecessary is that the character's death doesn't change the story one way or the other. In fact, the story wouldn't change at all if the character hadn't been there to begin with. If the character didn't need there to begin with, what are you writing about this character for? You can certainly kill a character in a pointless death. In fact, pointless deaths are sometimes what Joss Whedon is all about. But it should mean that your characters do experience a loss of some type. Whether that loss be emotional, whether that loss be physical, or whether that loss be in terms of capability. They should still experience a loss, even if it doesn't help them with their quest. The character who dies doesn't have to sacrifice themselves to try and take out the leader, or, well, they can, but just don't have them succeed at it. Your main character should have to deal with whatever it was that their friend was trying to destroy by sacrificing themselves. When this auxiliary character does die in a fight with some of the antagonists of the story, but don't let them succeed. You still want to have your main character have to deal with the antagonists throughout the rest of the book. That's all for today. If you enjoyed today's content, please click the like button below, and don't forget to subscribe on your way out. If you'd like to be notified immediately of when my videos come out, please click the notification bell. I try and post new videos on Tuesday, but sometimes I fall on my face, as happened last time. If you'd like to contact me for any reason, I'll leave all my contact information below. A quick update on my book. I've just received my book back from my copy editor, and I'm working on it. I've got up to chapter 8, and I'm including a lot of great suggestions that she had for my book. Hopefully I'll be done with it in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll move on to getting the cover, and then we'll move on to getting published. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Have a nice evening. But there are 2 things that it should never be. But there are 3 things that it should never be. Other keys are, don't worry, or I'm sure it'll be fine.